Hello everyone, welcome to this video on a recent paper published in Research Policy entitled Entrepreneurial Ecosystems and Regional Persistence of High-Growth Firms, a Broken Clock Critique.
My name is Alex Coad from University of Waseda in Japan.
And my name is Srhoj from the University of Split in Croatia.
Following on from the phenomenally successful region of Silicon Valley, everyone seems to be talking about entrepreneurial ecosystems these days. But notions of entrepreneurial ecosystems are slippery and seem to have largely escaped empirical testing. What we wanted to do with this paper is to derive some clear testable hypotheses and test them with appropriate data. A popular framework for thinking about entrepreneurial ecosystems can be found, for example, in Stam and van der Ven 2021 in Small Business Economics. There are 10 inputs in the ecosystem: formal institutions, entrepreneurship culture, networks, physical infrastructure, finance, leadership, talent, new knowledge, demand, and intermediate services. These inputs have a direct effect on the output, which is productive entrepreneurship. Productive entrepreneurship can mean different things to different people, but in general, it refers to high-growth firms. Let's take a closer look. The literature has repeatedly stated that the output of entrepreneurial ecosystems is the share of high-growth firms. For example, here are some quotes that state that the region's share of high-growth firms is the output of a region's entrepreneurial ecosystem. We find that the prevalence of high-growth firms in a region is strongly related to the quality of its entrepreneurial ecosystem. The envisaged output of the ecosystem, high-growth firms. We have proxied productive entrepreneurship with the prevalence of high-growth firms, the share of high-growth firms of the regional business population. And here are some quotes that state that we should expect persistence in a region's share of high-growth firms. Entrepreneurial ecosystems have emerged as a popular concept to explain the persistence of high-growth entrepreneurship within regions. Cluster and regional innovation system concepts provide well-researched frameworks that help us understand why some places enjoy persistently higher rates of high-growth entrepreneurship than others. The literature repeatedly states that high-growth firm shares are the output and that high-growth firm shares should be persistent. What our paper does is test these intuitions. Let's emphasize that there is a precise and standardized definition regarding what a high-growth firm actually is. This standardized definition is shared by the European Commission, the World Bank, the OECD, and many other researchers and organizations. If someone makes predictions regarding high-growth firms, this is testable because it has a precise definition. Essentially, a firm is a high-growth firm if it has a geometric average of at least 20% growth per year over a 3-year period. Here is the relevant formula. Because microfirms are considered to be of less relevance, there is a lower size threshold of 10 employees or more in the initial period. Furthermore, in recent times, considering that growth of 20% each year on average is quite rare, this threshold has been adjusted from 20% to 10% in some studies. The share of high-growth firms at the regional level refers to the number of high-growth firms in a region, scaled down by the number of potential high-growth firms. We therefore analyse the regional share of high-growth firms as a way of testing ideas from entrepreneurial ecosystems theory. We define an entrepreneurial ecosystem in the following way, which is quite standard. The ecosystem is bounded geographically, but is not bounded by industry sector. It is agnostic to industry sector. The entrepreneurial ecosystem is based on 10 interdependent elements that enable productive entrepreneurship within a region. More specifically, we have the 10 inputs shown previously, i.e. physical infrastructure, demand, intermediaries, talent, knowledge, leadership, finance, formal institutions, culture, and networks. And 1 output, the region's share of high-growth firms. Entrepreneurial ecosystems theory emphasizes the key role of high-growth entrepreneurs. We consider that all regions have an entrepreneurial ecosystem, but some entrepreneurial ecosystems are better than others. This latter aspect is potentially controversial because some authors consider that some regions can be completely devoid of an ecosystem. However, as discussed in the paper, in our view, all regions have at least a basic level of development of their entrepreneurial ecosystem. A basic observation is that there is a mismatch between the inputs and the outputs. The inputs are highly persistent over time, but the outputs are volatile. When it comes to regional shares of high-growth firms, a region may be a leader in one period and a laggard in the next period. This slide shows a diagram that links the persistence of the entrepreneurship ecosystem inputs to the persistence of the outputs. In our analysis, we do not measure the inputs, but analyze the persistence of the output regional shares of high-growth firms. This slide explains why our subtitle is a broken clock critique. Imagine a clock whose hands stop moving at, say, 12 o'clock. The clock will be correct twice a day, at noon and at midnight. But clearly such a clock is of limited usefulness for guiding action. The problem is that repeating cycles in the passage of time cannot be well explained by something that does not change over time. We argue that just as a broken clock is correct twice a day, entrepreneurial ecosystem predictions and recommendations may sometimes be correct, but are fundamentally flawed as long as time-changing outputs, such as the passage of time, are predicted using time-invariant variables, such as motionless clock hands. We show that regional high-growth firm shares vary considerably over time. The regions with the highest high-growth firm shares in one period are not necessarily those with the highest high-growth firm shares in the next period. What we do in our paper is focus just on measuring regional high-growth firm shares and their persistence. Measuring the entrepreneurial ecosystem inputs would be a hopeless task, so we abstract away from that and focus just on the outputs, which have precise definitions. But are the entrepreneurial ecosystem inputs really persistent? Yes, indeed. There is a high region-level persistence of entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial culture. Institutions are surprisingly inert and persistent over time. Differences in cultural attitudes across regions persist over hundreds of years. The location of universities in regions is highly persistent. The legal framework rarely changes. The region's physical infrastructure and relative development in terms of venture capital are highly persistent, and so on. All this leads us to the following hypotheses. Hypothesis 1, our main hypothesis, there is statistically significant positive persistence of the shares of high-growth firms at the level of regions. Hypothesis 2, which also seems worth testing with our data, there is statistically significant positive persistence in sector-level high-growth firm shares. We test these hypotheses using representative census data covering all firms in Croatia for the period 2004 to 2019 and Slovenia for the period 2007 to 2019. Before we show the results, let's imagine what they could look like. On the left, we have the case of high persistence. Regions with high shares of high growth firms in one period will have high shares of high growth firms in the next period. On the right, we have the case of no persistence in regional shares of high growth firms. A region with above average share of high growth firms in one period is not expected to have an above average share in the next period. So, what does the data show? We seem to be close to the case of no persistence. Let's take a look. Here are some results for Croatia. Regions with lots of high growth firms in one period are not necessarily more likely to have lots of high growth firms in the following period. This casts doubt on the mapping between time-invariant inputs and regional shares of high growth firms as the output. Similar results are obtained from analysis involving correlations and regressions. There actually seems to be more support for hypothesis 2, which predicts persistence in the shares of high growth firms within industries, than for hypothesis 1, which predicts persistence in the shares of high growth firms within regions. Low persistence of regional shares of high growth firms was observed previously by Friesenbichler and Holzel 2020 for Austria. And in addition to our results for Croatia, our results for Slovenia are similar, although there seems to be a bit more positive persistence of regional high growth firm shares in Slovenia than in the case of Croatia. More research is needed, drawing on a larger sample of countries, and we have already started some follow-up research with some colleagues at the European Commission. So to conclude, overall the data suggests that there is no clear persistence in regional high growth firm shares. Regions with large high growth firm shares in one period are not necessarily likely to have large high growth firm shares in the following period, and this is a puzzle for entrepreneurial ecosystems theory because it is not clear whether the inputs are actually connected to the alleged output. There actually seems to be more persistence in industry level high growth firm shares than for regional high growth firm shares. Therefore, we advise caution regarding policy recommendations emerging from entrepreneurial ecosystem theory. It is not yet clear whether the theory works. We hope to have contributed to the task of rigorously evaluating entrepreneurial ecosystem theory with a view to making it more effective.